From the nonpartisan Maddy Institute and the California channel at the state capitol, this is a Maddy Policy Brief. Welcome back. We're talking with Carol D'Alia with the state's Little Hoover Commission about a recent commission report on occupational licensing in California. You identified some unintended consequences of occupational licensing, particularly around the barriers to enter some of those occupations. What did you find?
Well, we found that particularly, again, for low-earning professions, not talking about doctors, dentists, lawyers, that it does create a significant barrier for people who might otherwise want to enter that profession. And it doesn't necessarily, as we talked about, provide additional consumer protection. So it limits entrepreneurship. We heard about, this was in a different state, but somebody who wanted to have a mobile barber shop, and that just wasn't possible. He had a need, people said they would be interested in it.
An entrepreneur, new concept, maybe he's going to make some money, drive, so people don't have to go to his place, he can drive it around, and couldn't do it.
Nope, couldn't do it. So it limits entrepreneurship. It makes it hard to relocate from another state to California. If you're a licensed professional, you have to think hard about, am I going to be able to have the job that I have here? We also got a sense that there were certain demographics, certain Californians that were more negatively impacted than others. But unfortunately, the boards don't all gather demographic information, so it was more anecdotally we heard.
Yeah.
And so it was creating barriers for certain groups of Californians, and we're not even sure who they are.
Yeah, it was interesting in reading your report that you were saying nationally, consumers pay an estimated $200 billion a year because of these licensing requirements, which is interesting. And it costs, you said, $300 in fees and 549 days of education, to take, on average, to get licensed in some of these occupations. Critics are saying that occupational licensing does increase prices without actually increasing the quality of services. Are you finding that cost-benefit analysis, are you finding the same thing? Is it worth the cost?
So what we did was we brought in, as typical for Little Hoover Commission, we have public hearings, and we had some of the best national experts on this topic, and we relied on their research. And one study in particular showed that, depending upon the occupation, licensing increased prices by anywhere from 5 to 33%, so a significant cost increase. A specific item that they looked at was more lenient dentistry licensing policies and whether or not that had bad outcomes as far as in terms of people's experience, and they found it didn't, but they did find that the stricter licensing increased the cost and then there were less dentists available. So at least in that example and others that we heard about, the additional licensing requirements weren't worth the added cost.
Yeah, the one I liked, I was reading your report, the one I liked was a study in Louisiana and Texas about licensed florists. Why would we have to license a florist? And did it really have any appreciable effect on consumer protection? Not really so much. It did increase prices to consumers, but it didn't really provide any additional protection, which I think is a great example of maybe some of the problems here. There's a wide range, we were talking about earlier, wide range in occupations that are licensed. I'm a lawyer, take the bar exam. You've got doctors on the one end, maybe of the continuum, the other end. You've got manicurists and pest control workers, wide range. Do all occupations that are licensed kind of get the same benefit from being licensed?
No, that's what we found. We found that the greatest benefit to licensing was to those in the higher income professions, those that you mentioned, the doctors, the dentists, the lawyers. But the effect on the wages is much lower or less for lower income occupations, even when there's a lot of significant training and education involved, such as teachers and certain nurses and cosmetologists. So no, it wasn't the same.
Yeah, it seems like, if you have these licensing requirements, let's say the bar exam, for example, that it increases wages because it decreases the supply. I remember when I took on one of the bar exams that I took in Connecticut, there was a requirement to know insurance law. Now, I never practiced insurance law. I had to study it, but it's a way to kind of keep people out. If you can't pass that section of the bar exam, it's fewer people that are lawyers that can charge higher rates.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the higher prices and barriers. There got to be some legitimate benefits to this too, right? I mean, there's some positive reasons why we already talked about. One is consumer protection generally, but what are some of the positive reasons why we would want to have licensing?
Well, the most important, you've just mentioned, that's the health and safety. And particularly when it comes to the healing arts professions, I think most people want to know that their doctor, their nurse, their dentist has some level of training and some level of competency. Right. It's some of the other areas where, just as you brought up with the floral designers, is that really, if the floral arrangement is not as pleasing, am I going to be hurt as a consumer? No, I'm probably just not going to call that florist again. So, but some of the other benefits beyond the consumer protection is sometimes it will take a profession that has not been professionalized and give it a new added layer so that people look to this profession as a licensed professional. It can also stimulate standards for service and quality. So you would hope that because you're using a licensed professional, you have some guarantee of...
It's standardized across the board.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm sorry. And there's also, you think when you report, you're talking about government guarantees of quality. If you have licensing, you're kind of given a guarantee. It's kind of like union carpenters or union electricians. If they go through an apprenticeship program, you know they're going to have a certain level of quality. You know, if they don't, you're not necessarily sure of that.
Exactly.
For a more in-depth analysis of this and other public policy issues important to Californians, please log on to our website at maddyinstitute.org and click on the Policy Analysis tab.